Today's episode is brought to you by cattle. Every product launch faces a chicken and egg problem. You need reviews to convert, but you need conversions to get reviews. Cattle can help.
Cattle helps brands win share. They leverage their consumer panel for insights, collecting receipts, and driving product ratings and reviews. It is the largest daily active survey panel in Canada, with over 10,000 daily active users and over 100,000 monthly active users. Let cattle be your chicken and or your egg, depending on your perspective. Visit getcattle.com to learn more.
When you take a step back, you're like, does it really help grow top line? Does it really help improve profitability? Like, probably not. Then why did I just spend all my time on it?
Welcome to Hearts and Carts, the CPG podcast, the podcast about the people behind the products that are winning hearts and filling carts. This cast is for anyone with an interest in the world of consumer products. We're your hosts, Justin Osborne and Alex Hill, and our mission is to bring you weekly content that helps you be a better and more informed CPG professional. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Hearts and Carts. Thank you so much for joining us again. Justin, who are we going to be chatting with today?
We are chatting with Sean Lee, who is the president and co-founder of Cincy Brands. Sean's had a really interesting career in the CPG space, starting off at Procter & Gamble, one of the largest CPG companies in the world, learning a ton from them, running a ton of cool campaigns that just about everybody listening will be familiar with, then moving into more of the e-commerce space and now venturing out on his own. So he's going to talk to us about that, about his learnings, and then advice for the next generation. With that, we will move into the interview. Please remember to like, subscribe, follow us on our social media channels, and continue to interact with us. And here we go.
The lights of Cincinnati, oh, so many miles behind. I could build myself a new life.
Sean, how are you?
Good, man. How are you guys?
I'm great. Thanks for hopping on the show here and for agreeing to join, especially I'm sure this week is busy for you, professionally and personally, but saw some posts with you and saw your LinkedIn page and sort of your career path and thought that you would be a great voice for the show, and our listeners could learn a lot from you. So I'm glad you could make the time to meet with us.
Yeah, excited to be here, and hopefully I can add some value for the listeners.
Yeah. So let me introduce you. We have Sean Lee on the show today, who is the president and co-founder at Cincy Brands. He's had a long career in the space and some interesting different turns. Started in sort of large CPG at Procter & Gamble, and then moved into sort of some e-commerce spaces, and now is working in the better for you. So it's actually a fairly similar path to mine, which is interesting. Just a more successful path than mine, but same sort of idea kind of going.
I don't know if I would say that.
And so a path that I think a lot of people are doing is sort of they're starting in big CPG and then moving into the smaller, better for you brands and taking some of those learnings and using that to help build up these brands. So really cool career path, and something I think that's on the minds of a lot of people as they begin their journeys and try and figure out what they want to do. So for us, what we want to do is provide some insights, career journey information to that next generation of people so that they can be more successful. And that's why I really think your story is going to be helpful. So maybe you could start off with just telling us about you, when you finished up school, what you started to do and how you started your career, and then walk us through to where you are right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. And thanks again for having me on, and hopefully I can be helpful to kind of the next generation or people that are looking to get into CPG and do what we're all doing. So yeah, I mean, my path to CPG was a little bit probably unpredictable. I don't think I was a kid saying like I really want to work in CPG when I'm older, like like everybody else. So originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the States. Grew up here, went to the University of Cincinnati, and originally majored in pre-med. So I did about 2 years in pre-med, wanted to go to med school, do that. After a while, I just realized, you know what, do I really want to commit to like 8 to 10 years? Like, I don't know if my heart's really in it. So did what everybody does when that happens and switched to the business school because, why not? Like all my friends were doing it. Switched to the business school and picked finance as a major. I figured I've always kind of been creative and analytical. And I figured having a finance kind of degree or like analytics type degree would be incredibly helpful no matter what I did. Went down that path and, you're in college, you're kind of figuring out what you like, what you don't like. I think I had interned at Wells Fargo, Merrill Lynch, a few other places like that, and realized, the suit and tie, like, blue suit, black shoes, like just wasn't really for me, a little too stuffy. And, there's a lot of regulation. You're kind of bound by what you can and can't do. And it's not to say it's not creative, but it's not super creative, right? It's a lot of like formulas and spreadsheets. So I was a little late in my career. So already in finance and was like, what do I want to go do? So when I was in undergrad, I had run for student body vice president on a slate with another guy, and I ran our campaign. And the whole thing was like, I did market research, insights, brought focus groups together and figured out like, how could we win this thing? And what were the right messages to go do that? And I think we won by like 70% of the vote. So it was like an awesome experience. And I kind of looked at it, I'm like, maybe I want to go into politics, and realized, long hours, a lot of moving, probably not a lot of money in it when you're running political campaigns, but like, what's the best parallel? And it was probably consumer marketing. So late in my career, I was like, how do I get into P&G? Because it was local in Cincinnati. Like that's the mecca of where you go learn consumer marketing. So did a lot of networking. I think I had graduated during the recession of '08. So everybody was kind of on a hiring freeze at the time. So I had met a ton of people like presidents, others at P&G, anybody that would get coffee with me and give me advice on like how to, take the test that you need to take to get in there and get through the interview process. So was fortunate to kind of build a rapport with 4 or 5 people that mentored me along the way. Went through their entire process. They gave me a call and said, hey, we really like you, but we're on a hiring freeze. So, thanks, but no thanks. Maybe we'll call you back sometime. So I'm like, what do I go do? I'm 22, like coming out of school, have a little bit of student loan debt. So I just took the best available job in finance that I could get. I think I worked at PNC Bank for, 6 months, 9 months in kind of their corporate banking training program. And was doing it again. Finance wasn't what I wanted to do. So I was kind of constantly looking at like what's next while I was kind of going through this training program. And fortunately, P&G called me back and was like, hey, wasn't expecting that. They're like, hey, we've got an opening, hiring freeze is over. We want to have you come work on the Iams pet food brand, which, beggars can't be choosers. So I'm like, oh yeah, great. Like I'll sign me up. So ended up leaving PNC and started at P&G like pretty right away, probably like 6 to 9 months after graduating. And I mean, it was a phenomenal experience. I think for anybody that's wanting to get into consumer goods, I mean, you can certainly work in a consumer goods startup. You could work for a private equity consumer goods company, but I think whether it's P&G, whether it's Unilever, Pepsi, Kellogg's, Coca-Cola, I think even if you only spend a few years there, the training that you're going to get on how to think about consumer goods, how to really run a consumer goods P&L, manage a cross-functional team, is second to none, right? I would call it the consumer goods MBA is working at those companies because like they've been doing this for years, right? So the first few years there are very prescriptive of you have your, I don't even know what they call them now, but I was an assistant brand manager. So that you've got your training cohort and it's very baked out. They like really teach you everything you need to know. They give you some leash to go make decisions and work on TV commercials and write your monthly business letter update and look at all the like retail sales data, but never enough to really like let you shoot yourself in the foot or really cause the business any harm. But I mean, for anybody, I mean, it's great experience and you really get to see how these brands work, right? I mean, at the time I was there, Iams was $1 billion brand. And I was, making TV commercials and doing consumer research about those TV commercials and spending, $50 to $60 million of TV buys to put them on air at 23, 24. So, I mean, yeah. A really cool experience that I really look back fondly on and would recommend to anybody. And so I'll kind of stop there. And I'd say the next kind of tranche of advice that I would have is if you do go that path and work at these companies, I think the people and the network that you build there are also incredible. So even having left, like oftentimes incredibly smart people, they leave and they go work at other consumer goods companies. They launch their own businesses. They work at venture capital firms. So even just for me, as I've went out and done more entrepreneurial things, the network that I have from working there and kind of the credibility of talking to other alumni is great because everyone knows that you went through the same shared experience, the same training. You're kind of cut from the same cloth. So in general, like I could probably call anybody else that worked at P&G or often other consumer goods companies, and they're usually going to at least take my call or hear me out if I'm selling a product or a service or something, because we all kind of had that same shared experience. It's almost like, people that were in a fraternity or sorority in college, or somebody that was in the military. It's like that shared background that I think is like a weird unspoken cultural thing that everybody kind of understands and relates to one another.
Yeah, you described it as like the P&G MBA, which is like it's like a university alumni, the way that you can reach out to them and you build that network.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a ton of sense. What was it like going from banking to P&G? Because I would imagine there's probably large cultural differences between the two different areas.
Yeah, I mean, it was completely different, right? Like banking was very, very kind of prescriptive. It was working with some clients or like I was working with some middle market firms and trying to do financing, right? So it's like you get the data from them, you kind of understand what they're looking for, and then you have a little bit of influence, but you're really just packaging it up and then sending it to an underwriter, right? So it's like very follow the process, kind of like there's not a lot of deviation, right? Then I came to P&G and they're like, well, like in meetings, they're like it's a very P&G thing, and I think a lot of other consumer goods do this too. But I remember my first meeting, probably a month in, we were reviewing like a print ad or some copy in a marketing meeting, and the general manager looked at me first and said, "Well, you're the newest person here. What do you think?" So you kind of put on the spot, and you're like, "Hey, they want your opinion, they want your perspective," and I think that was probably the big difference. Is they really, in consumer goods companies like P&G, want you to be an owner of the business and always come with a perspective, which I think is part of the culture there. And that's just a lot different than a lot of other companies, period. Right. You're not expected to be the cross-functional leader. We would call it like the hub and spoke model. Like you're at the center of the hub, and you're expected to kind of know what's going on with product supply, with forecasting, with finance. So a lot of responsibility. And I think that was probably the biggest shift of going from kind of these defined systems and structures with kind of narrow responsibility to, a lot of broad responsibility where you're expected to go deep and kind of know everything about the business, which again is a great experience for anybody that's trying to get into CPG, because, it's like riding a bike at state. Those principles that you learn stay with you forever.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. So after IAMS, what came next?
Yeah. So after IAMS, it was interesting. I was at IAMS at a time when I first started there. There was a big supply disruption. I think we had some salmonella in our dog food and had to do a recall. And, that was probably one of the, like, going on a side tangent here, one of the first like good marketing lessons that I learned was we weren't shipping like 70% of our products for 3 to 6 months. The next logical thing is, well, maybe we should just cut our advertising since we're not on shelf. Why would we advertise if we're not on shelf? And for a brand with that much awareness and kind of, national trial, that was probably the biggest mistake we could have made, because once we went dark on advertising for 3 to 6 months, when the product did get back on shelf, kind of the uptick was not as fast as we thought it would be, because, we hadn't had any impressions or awareness for a good half of a year. So you're almost not starting from scratch, but you're kind of getting back into people's mindsets, and you got to hit them with a message, 7 or 8 times before you're back in the consideration set. Yeah. So looking back, like that's always a lesson that stuck with me. You probably never want to go dark in marketing. You could pull back on some dollars, but don't completely cut it. So that was interesting. So worked there to kind of stabilize that business with a great team. And then fortunately, like the last year I was there, we were growing again and had kind of the ability to kind of pick what I wanted to do next, which was fortunate. So ended up on Old Spice, which was awesome. It was right around the time that, Isaiah Mustafa, the guy, the I'm on a horse guy commercials had come out. So great people. There were a guy named George Felix had worked on that campaign, who's done some awesome things. He was the CMO in marketing at KFC. And then I think he was at Match.com. And I think now he's at Chili's, but great guy. And I was able to kind of come in and really work on that business after him, and did a lot of work with Terry Crews and kind of brought him on as the second Old Spice guy, which was a ton of fun. Great relationships with everybody there. And the cool thing is, like, we got onto a rocket ship, and that business went from almost being irrelevant to we were growing it for the few years I was there, like 10, 15% a year, which for anybody that's working in big consumer goods, like that's incredible. Huge. Normally you're going to grow 1, 2, 3% a year, and that's success. Right. So it was a super cool time to be there. And I think that was where really started to learn more about e-commerce and digital, because we were targeting young guys, right? And how do you reach young guys? Like, we weren't doing a lot of TV buys besides live sports. And I mean, this is kind of dating myself back in the early 2010s, but like we were putting all of our ads in like YouTube, Facebook, Reddit at the time. So just a different model than P&G, right? Where you're normally like blanketing the airwaves with national television. We're like, we're only going to do live sports, and then we're only going to spend on digital, where these guys spend their time. And I mean, it was a cool process. And I think, a foreshadowing of what would happen with every other age group going forward.
Yeah, because it really did shift. Like when I was a kid, Old Spice seemed like an old man brand.
I was gonna say
something my dad,
brand.
yeah, something my dad would use. And then over that period of time with those commercials, that marketing campaign, it definitely became like the millennial product. And now, like, I still use it. I still use it every day. I even use the Swagger one, which they talk about.
Yeah,
so great, man. I still use the product all the time. So it did shift from like my thinking of the product as a grandpa brand to something that I was using and everyone my age group was using. So it really did have a massive like paradigm shift.
Yeah, the cool thing about it, and like I can't take any credit for this. I mean, it was like the awesome team at Wyden and Kennedy, who's Nike's creative agency. Once they brought them on as the main agency, they really, I think there was kind of some folklore at P&G before Wyden and Kennedy came on. They had a couple agencies pitching them, and one of the decisions was like, do you rebrand it as New Spice, or do you just like sell it off or shut it down completely? Wyden and Kennedy came in and said, no, you double down on Old Spice, and here's why. Because they had this data that basically said it had a crazy amount of like household penetration market share with like men 60 to 80, like what you typically thought, right? Like your grandpa uses it. And then there was like this 25 to 40-year-old group, or like 25 to 50-year-old group that just like didn't use it. So they're like, we're just going to write them off, who are never going to think it's cool because it's what their dad uses. Let's go after the grandkids of those people. And like their insight was like, I think the first campaign they launched was, you wouldn't be here if your grandpa didn't wear it. And like, they really just tried to make it this like cool thing where like, these like cool old school pictures of like grandpas with like their, like back black and white photos, and like
their old
like
Swagger.
Their old Swagger. That's like really cool. And that's how they restaged the brand and like went after it. And then obviously like started really just targeting that younger demo. And then I think that they were able to hold that as that demographic started, becoming our age too. So as far as I know, they still have a pretty good market share between, 15 all the way up to probably 35 or 40 now, which is pretty incredible for how they turned that brand around. And again, Wyden Kennedy, Nike's agency, like we've all seen what they've done with Nike. Like those guys are, probably they push the limits of creativity, and they're awesome to work with.
Yeah. It just feels like actually similar to what you said with IAMS. It's like, you got to keep filling that bucket, right? Like you're always leaking, and it feels like a smart strategic move for Old Spice to just decide that the cost to get the 25 to 50 in is something you just don't want to pay. And you got those pliable younger people who you can actually put a message together for. So really
and
smart.
the insight was like, those guys admire their grandpas, right? Like oftentimes you admire your grandparents, and it's not, they're not uncool. They're like, hey, like I love going over to my grandparents' house, or like these guys, they have time to spend with me. They're cool, but you think your parents might be nerdy or something. So that was the whole insight that kind of they leveraged to turn it around, which was really incredible. But yeah, so did Old Spice had a great experience there, and then was promoted in P&G they just formed this like global digital e-commerce team, and I think part of it was probably I was young and on Old Spice, which was very like digital forward. And they were like, let's just tap the young guy and put him in the e-commerce role because nobody else understands e-commerce. He'll figure it out and tell us what to go do. So that was cool. So it was in that role and really helped for about 2 years, the company think about how they should go to market direct to consumer. Like what's the role of a brand's website? Should you sell direct to consumer? Should it just be informational? And then at the time, Amazon was probably about 3 or 4% of P&G's overall sales. And then in China, Tmall, which is part of Alibaba, was probably comparable. So it was responsible with like, how do we think about the role of websites and D2C, but also like, what's the playbook and best practice for Amazon and Tmall in China? So I spent a lot of time kind of rolling out the best practices and strategies for how our brand should think about it, and spent a ton of time in Asia and in Geneva, really kind of, selling those playbooks to the company and trying to, sometimes felt like pounding my head against the wall because if it wasn't in the US at the time, if it wasn't Walmart or Target, nobody really wanted to talk about it. But I'm like, hey guys, this Amazon thing's going to be big. Like if you can get out in front of it before Unilever and our competitors do, we're going to have a massive advantage, which is cool. And I think, that ended up proving true. I mean, Amazon's probably the number 2 customer behind Walmart now for P&G. But at the time, it kind of felt like, you were screaming like, hey, the world's changing, but it wasn't in the immediate term. So nobody really was rewarded on it or cared a ton. But it was a great experience to go kind of dig in and do that and evangelize ecom.
Yeah,
For sure.
Sometimes big companies move slow, right? And then it's also like,
Correct.
if you're incentivizing your people on a yearly basis, not on a 5 or 10 year rolling, it's like, well, this thing's gonna be huge in 10 years, but I want my bonus this year, right? So it can be tricky.
Exactly.
But an amazing time to be part of it, just to grow that, because it's now that it's grown into this behemoth, especially through COVID, like it's cool to see it from the very beginning to where it is now. To your point, it's probably second biggest customer, and Alibaba is huge as well, right, over there. So it's all grown absolutely massively. Okay, so you did that for a while, and then it looks like you moved into another role at P&G.
Yep. So from there, I was still kind of in this e-commerce kick and wanted to kind of do what I'd done in Old Spice with like digital, and then everything I'd kind of learned about D2C and e-commerce. And this new group, there's always like some group at big companies, right? Some new business creation group. They were just kind of reorging and created this group called P&G Ventures. And the whole thing was like, it was going to be it shared the floor with the C-suite of P&G. And it was all about like, how do we pull it out from the different business units that, may not be thinking about disruptive innovation or entering new categories, and how do we create new brands by either partnering with them or acquiring them. So I thought that was really interesting. And I've probably bucked the trend. Like normally the trend would be like, oh, I did this role, I'll go back and be a brand manager or director on like Tide or Pampers. But I've always kind of followed what's like intellectually interesting to me, which may not be the normal path that people take at CPG, but it always ended up kind of, for me, working out and working out well. So I found this role in P&G Ventures, and basically came into an assignment, and they were like, hey, there's D2C brands, there's all these things that are kind of disrupting. We want to play in the safe and effective space, or like kind of where I am today, the better for you space. Like, what are different categories that we could go either acquire or kind of find technology and go disrupt? So worked with a small team and really looked at a few different categories. Insect control popped to the top of the list, which, isn't the sexiest category in the world, but we really liked it because it almost felt like Gillette, right? Where like you had Dollar Shave Club and Harry's kind of start eating market share with these new models of a behemoth that probably had 80% market share and dominated the shelves. Insect control around the globe was very, very similar. In the US, you've got Raid, which everyone, probably in Canada too, Raid and Hot Shot. But it's pretty hard to break into. So a lot of startups can't get into it because there's a lot of like regulatory stuff. You have to file in different states, and in Canada, like different provinces, and sometimes with the EPA in the United States. Same thing in China, a lot of like regulatory hoops. So we were like, let's go figure out how we disrupt insect control, and really tried to throw the typical P&G playbook out the window, and was like, how do we learn from what Harry's did, what Casper did, the guys at Hubble Contacts? The cool thing was, because I was in P&G Ventures, a lot of those people would take my call, or I could find somebody that would introduce me to them. So I remember talking to one of the co-founders of Casper, co-founders of Hubble Contacts, and basically just would be like, will you give me an hour and let me pick your brain on how you're going to market, what you're investing ads on, like how you're driving kind of direct response, like trial. And basically after I talked to like 4 or 5 of these type of brands and the co-founders, like everybody had the same playbook. And I'm like, great, let's just go do that in insect control. So we originally launched it on a Shopify site. I had a small agency that I had the crazy story. Like they wanted us to use like a big New York agency. I forget what it was, maybe Anomaly or one of those guys. They were not suited to like spin up like 50 different Facebook ads and different copy, like dating myself at the time because everything was Facebook, but like spinning all that up, they were like, hey, we'll do one ad. It's going to take forever and a bunch of rounds of creative. And I'm like, I can't work with these guys. Like,
go faster.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to do this. Right. So I found an agency out of Houston, Texas called MMI, who I still have a great relationship with their CEO today. They had just been doing some test stuff with P&G, and I'm like, they're already an approved vendor. I know that they know performance marketing. I kid you not, I had to write a 1-page memo to Mark Pritchard, the CMO of P&G, to get an exception to allow them to buy advertising for this new brand Zevo, which is kind of funny. So he granted it, and like I basically just flew down there, and we figured out how we're gonna market this thing to our Shopify site, what the metrics are going to be, and I was buying ads, they were buying ads. We kind of just treated it like a partnership, and we were tinkering with Google, we were tinkering with Facebook daily. And we got it to a point where I think we had ordered an initial batch of inventory, and we ended up like selling out in like the first like 2 months. And we projected that was going to last us like 6 to 9 months of our tests. And we were like, all right, we're on to something here. I obviously like times have changed, but we were acquiring customers for like $9 in the insect control category, which I'm like, who the hell is going to buy insect control online, and like let alone at not a $9 cost per acquisition. So we were like, great, we're really onto something here. Like, how do we accelerate this even further? So kind of took that Shopify data and ran the same play that I saw Harry's and these other guys running, which is how do you grow your awareness with your distribution? So P&G could go get 100% distribution if they wanted to, but you're never going to make enough people aware to keep that distribution, and it might fail and get delisted. So what I saw with like Harry's and these other guys is like they would grow online until, they had a core base, like 10, 15, 20% of the population were aware of them. Then they go to Target, right? Which has like 10, 15% market share, often the same kind of affluent customer. So I'm like, how do we do that same model with Zevo? So we chose Home Depot because they were looking for innovation. It wasn't the typical place that people came to from big companies to launch new innovation. They got behind it. We did a year exclusive with them, massively exceeded expectations there, which was really cool. And then took it to Target year 2. And then they went Walmart year 3 and kind of ran that same Harry's model, which was cool to see because the brand grew sustainably in a way where the investments made sense. And I think today, like I was just talking to somebody with a brand a couple months ago, I think it's about an $80 to $100 million revenue brand now in the US, which again, for not existing 5 or 6 years ago is pretty cool, pretty impressive. But I got to the point where P&G was pushing me like, it's time for your new assignment. We want you to go back and, be a director of, something in fabric care or baby care. And I just kind of looked at it and I was like, you know what? I really like this entrepreneurial thing. I probably worked startup hours on something I had no equity in. Like, how do I go kind of get that small company experience and continue doing it? So I was like, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. Like, I'm actually going to resign because I've decided I'm going to go do something different, which has a whole host of issues. I had to meet with a ton of, senior executives. They're trying to convince me to stay. I'm like, look, guys, I've made my decision. Like, I think the small company route's the way I want to go. But it was a great way to kind of close my chapter at P&G and left on very good terms, and still have great relationships with a ton of people that work there and a ton of people who have since retired or left.
Yeah. And that I'm sure is scary, right? Leaving a company that one is one of the biggest CPG companies in the entire world, right?
Yep.
And that you've built up so much internal equity with, and like, all those relationships and all that. So you've proved yourself, and you probably have a ton of different opportunities. There's so many people that work there. There's always people moving around. So to leave and know, hey, I want to stay down this smaller path. Like, was it just that you enjoyed the last role so much? Was it an opportunity came up? Like, what was it that gave you that push? Because I'd imagine a lot of people are scared to make that leap.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a little of it was, there's kind of a couple of factors that I've been thinking about for a while. One was there was an opportunity that came up, which I'll talk about. Sure. But I kind of always had this vision. Like, I was a little bit risk averse, like as I went through college and everything else. Kind of my background, I grew up in very like working class, like blue collar neighborhood, like the whole thing. So it was like working at P&G was like great. Like that's that's a great achievement for everyone. So I was never like, oh, I could take a risk out of college and go launch something or run my own company. But always had this in the back of my mind. Like, I want to work towards a goal where I own my own company, or I'm running my own company, or I'm the CEO of like a private equity backed company or something like that. So that was kind of always in the back of my mind of what I wanted to do. And it really started kind of thinking about it more as I was, almost a decade into P&G. And I'm like, how do I kind of get there? So I was thinking about that. I was also looking at, as I saw people maybe a decade older than me at P&G, not that they weren't happy there, but they kind of hit their ceiling at P&G, and maybe I would say weren't as fulfilled as they probably were when they were younger working there. And probably because they couldn't leave, because at that point you have too many stock options, too many golden handcuffs that you kind of just like, even if it's not what you want to do, you just stick it out until you retire. And for me, I was like, if I hit that point, I know that I'm going to be in that same situation, and I'm probably not going to leave. So I was like, now's the time to do it. If I'm going to do it, I might as well just like rip off the Band-Aid and go. At the same time, the next company I worked for was a company called Pure Romance. The CEO, I knew their CEO, and he was looking to kind of digitally transform their business, and was kind of approaching me about coming on to do that. I would report directly to him, help stand up their e-commerce arm. And for me, I'm like, it was kind of a natural, like, I'll go to this. It was about a $120 million annual revenue company, family owned and private equity owned. I'm like, it's a great transition to go from like billions of dollars and unlimited resources to this like still a large company, but I think it had
not
100
like a
employees.
startup, but like
Yeah, right.
a nice in between step, I would say. Yeah.
And I thought the challenge was, for me, I thought the challenge was interesting just because I had learned so much in ecom, and like their model was kind of shifting from what I would call like the MLM. It's like the MLM business, right? So, but it was very much like the Tupperware type model where, B2B, like it's all like consultants order products from a B2B website. They carry it at their house. They go have parties. They sell the product. They do all that. But the world was shifting, and the CEO kind of knew that and got out in front of it. And was like, we need to have a better, digital presence, probably more like a rodent and field, something like that, where they could carry inventory. If they didn't want to carry all the inventory, they could just, check people out on the website. We would drop ship it and they would make a commission. It would be less than if they bought it and carried it, but, kind of supplement that model. And then the other thing we were doing is figuring out, because in that model, the margins are incredible if you go direct, because you're giving everybody kind of margin along the way in that MLM model. So we also tried to figure out, like, how do we sell direct? Because, you're operating at like 80-90% margins. So you can easily invest the money to go direct and acquire the customers and do all that. So I was kind of tasked with twofold, like, how do I enable the consumer or the consultants to start selling more online? And how do we set up drop shipping and that whole system? And then two, how do we also sell direct? Because that is insanely profitable for that business model. So did that, had built out a team of about, I think 5 or 6 people, got it humming. I think we had shifted the business from probably like 90% in-home, kind of the old school party plan model, to about 75%, 25. So 25 was now on e-commerce. I kind of hit the point where I'm like, my team was humming. There weren't a lot of things that I really need to push on. So I kind of felt like, you know what, I could mail it in and work like 3 hours a day and everything would probably be great and we'd still be growing. And I kind of looked at it, I'm like, what's my path forward? Because I'm reporting to the CEO of the family that started it. I'm like, I'm not taking his job. Like, so what am I going to do next? So I was kind of getting a little restless and was like, I feel like I've done what I can do here. I've got a good team in place. Like, the business is going in the right direction. And like, I recently had lunch with CEO, and COVID, obviously that infrastructure that we put in place accelerated even further. And it's probably 60% online now and 40% the old school model. So really kind of a cool thing, but I was looking for what's next there. Which led me to, I want to go to like startup, like almost no resources, like let's get it off the ground type thing. So there's an opportunity to join a company called Amify that was really originally an old school, just like a reseller on Amazon, right? So buy products, resell it. They were trying to get more into like the tech enabled services model. So like a Jungle Scout with like, agency managed services type thing where you would run people's Amazon's accounts end to end. So I came on, I was with the intent of like moving most of the company to Cincinnati, which we ended up doing. It was located in DC. So as we made that shift from reseller to the new model with VC funding, I think I was employee 1 in Cincinnati, opened up our office, was leading sales and marketing and kind of bringing new clients on and taking it until we made it, right? I was like really just using my P&G background, and a guy who's my co-founder now was our president there, and we both just would lean in on our P&G backgrounds and try to get people to sign up with us until we could get enough logos to kind of get the flywheel going. So that was that was kind of my next iteration of like, great, I went from P&G, this billion-dollar company, to $100 million company, to now, startup with VC funding. Like we're trying to scale quickly, and I'm employee 1. And how do we? I think by the time I left, we had 40 or 50 employees in Cincinnati, and 50 to 60 clients, from like, no name brands to First Aid Beauty, which P&G owns, to some of Energizer's brands, to Dr. Squash, the soap company. So it was like a really cool experience to kind of build that out. And for me, like, learn everything about selling on Amazon, right? From a content standpoint, from an operation standpoint, how you optimize advertising. Like, that was probably a weak spot for me, that, all the same principles of consumer goods still hold true, but it's just like, how do you apply those specifically to the Amazon channel, which then kind of lended to like Walmart.com, which is, very similar to that. So incredibly cool experience to do that as well.
Yeah, a little different selling services as well, I guess.
Yeah, that was like, I think for me, that was a great experience to kind of, I'd never led a sales team before. So I had salespeople reporting to us, and we had quotas, and we were doing all that. So it was cool to learn B2B and really figure out, who your ideal prospect is, how you qualify them, how you have a great upfront conversation about their pain points and whether or not your service makes sense for them.
Yeah, Dr. Squatch is a good one too.
That was a fun brand to work with.
I saw the CMO speak at Brand Week earlier this year, and yeah, what they've done is pretty crazy. I think they're like the number one natural male brand in health and beauty now. So
It's crazy. I mean, I
yeah,
think they were doing probably like 20 or 30 million on Amazon. And I know they've grown pretty. They took some funding, but a lot of it's been organic growth and just doing it
yeah,
very smartly.
yeah,
Yeah, I almost feel like the experience on Amazon is so important now for anyone in the CPG space. It's like, 10 years ago, if you were in the US, you had to get sales experience on the Walmart business. In Canada, you had to get
Yep.
experience on the Loblaws business. Like that was like a box you had to tick to be like,
Yep.
I can move to the next level or I can do whatever. Now it's like that Amazon experience is the box that you need to tick because so much of the world is going that way. And it's also relevant to any other websites, like you said, like Walmart.com or Target or anywhere else, right? Like a lot of the same rules and principles apply. So if you can get
Yep.
those learnings, it's huge.
Yep.
Huge.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree.
So that was about 2.5 years there. You learned sort of that whole e-commerce side, right? And then you made the decision to start Cincy Brands with, it sounds like another gentleman from Amify. So maybe walk us through
Yep.
the decision to do that and what Cincy Brands is.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, like I said, the goal was kind of always to get to like, how do we own our own company and build something that we're proud of? And Andy, my co-founder, kind of had that same vision too. We originally worked together on IMS way back in the day when I was 23. So it was kind
Oh,
of, we
really?
came full circle,
That's awesome.
and now it's our
cool.
third time working together. But yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things we had seen. I think it was kind of really like the summation of everything I'd done, right? Like at P&G Ventures, we were looking at, do we acquire businesses versus launch them? I found a ton of really cool businesses, doing 1 to 10 million in revenue. Then I'm like, this would be a great business to own and run, but probably never going to be on the level that P&G wants it to be,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
100 million, $200 million business. So I was always intrigued by that. I think after 2.5 years of being on the agency side, dealing with clients, like I commend all the agency people that have ever had to put up with my shit over the years. Like, it wears, it can wear you down. So I was kind of I was like, all right, I want to get back to the brand side of things. So we launched Cincy Brands kind of with the idea of, let's take all these skill sets that we have. Can we go find better for you brands, which is kind of where my experience was and where all the trends are, that are doing 1 to 10 million in revenue, ideally profitable, that we can acquire and kind of run at an operating company level, that as we look for acquisition brands, have the potential to do well and are already established in a couple of channels, right? So the Amazon, Walmart.com marketplace world, the direct-to-consumer world, so your Shopify websites, and then some retail distribution or the potential to go into retail, so that we could use all of our experiences, acquire them, and then put growth plans in place, brand dependent, to try grow all three channels in a smart way over a 5, 6, 7 year time horizon. And can we take a $6 million brand and grow it to 15 or 20, and then we either keep it and run it for a very long time, or we look to sell it to a private equity firm or exit it further upstream, right? So that's kind of our whole thesis and impetus of this. When we were at Amify, we were working with a lot of the Amazon aggregators. So we were seeing that business model, and our spin on it was, we don't want to buy just 100% Amazon only brands. Like that's a fine business model, but we think there's something here where you can do that same model with, brands that have more awareness and can hang outside of, Amazon search, paid search, and organic search. So that was kind of the impetus for why we started it. We wanted to do it in Cincinnati because with Kroger here, with P&G here, with all the agencies and support staff, like Cincinnati is a phenomenal consumer goods talent company, but or part of the country. But all the consumer goods startups happen in New York, San Francisco, LA, Austin, Texas. And people are kind of clamoring for something different. Like even the agencies that work on P&G brands are like, I would love to work on, and we proved that out at Amify when we hired 50 people. They were all from that ecosystem. Like, I want to work on something new and different and exciting. So that was that's our kind of our thesis of, we get good people here in Cincinnati, we'll build it. And then from a shipping standpoint, we're centrally located in the heart of the US. So it makes kind of 3PL, warehousing, shipping easy for all the brands too. So that's why that was kind of our whole impetus, and our vision is, how do we build, for lack of a better term, like a mini P&G that's, 500 million, $1 billion in revenue over a, 10 to 15 year period.
Very cool.
awesome.
And all focused on the better for you sort of products, right? And so why the decision to do that? Like, was that personal? Was that the trends combination?
A combination. I think when Andy and I were talking about it, we were like, we want to acquire brands that are going to resonate with, millennial and Gen Z shoppers, like,
Yeah.
and we'll have long kind of growth patterns in life. And then we also looked at like, what do we consume ourselves, or what do we give our kids, or what do we bring into our house for our pets? And we're like, we use all these brands ourselves. Like, why
Yeah.
would we
Yeah.
acquire something different if we didn't feel passionate about it? So it was kind of our own personal interests with where the trends are. And, I think probably for me, like having launched a Better For You brand that disrupted some of the old categories, like knowing that there's a nice playbook and people are open to alternatives, and oftentimes we'll spend a little bit more of a premium if it's a little bit better for you, or the ingredients are a little bit more premium or cleaner than other things that are out there.
For sure. Well, tell us a little bit about. It looks like you've done at least one acquisition, VitaBox. Tell us a bit about that one.
Yeah. So as we were thinking about how do we build this company out, and we have another acquisition in the works. Hopefully we close in January. I can't really say much more about that, but it's an actual consumer brand. But
Cool.
as we're looking at this, we're like, if you look at P&G, right, what are they? They're a house of brands, and they're also kind of a distribution company.
Yeah.
So we looked at VitaBox, and it's an operations company, right? It's an arbitrage reseller that buys product from, Unilever, prestige brands that own like Luden's and Dramamine, and a lot of private brands, and resells them on Amazon, Walmart, eBay, Kroger.com, the different marketplaces, and some through Vitabox.com, although it's a smaller portion of the overall business. And we looked at that and we were like, their warehouse was here in Cincinnati. The company had existing revenue, and kind of, I think we have now 23 warehouse employees, really good bones of a company. The ability to store products in a warehouse, to do direct to consumer fulfillment, Amazon, FBA, Walmart, kind of WFS prep.
Yeah.
You can do fulfilled by merchant, and then also the ability to service B2B orders. So we looked at it as like, let's buy our distribution and operating company as the base of this, so that we don't have to go buy one brand for $6 million and be like, now what are we going to go do? We got to go get a 3PL. We got to go get our own warehouse. And like,
Smart.
The costs just don't justify it. So we bought that business, and we've doubled it since we acquired it, which has been awesome. It's a profitable business. So it's a great cash flowing business for us. So that's gone kind of better than we've expected. And then we've been patient as we've been looking for other brands, because as I'm sure listeners or you guys have seen, like in 2020, 2021, e-commerce brands, Amazon brands were all the rage. Like valuations went up beyond what you would typically pay for something like that, to the
Some
point
of them
where
were some were outrageous. Yeah.
yeah. So like even then, like a lot of people are paying 5, 6, 7 times annual profit for these businesses, which is like, when you look at like using debt to buy them and everything else, you're like, like it becomes pretty challenging to do. So even through most of this year, I think there's just been expectation readjustments on that. So we're like, our philosophy is, we've got this great business. We don't want to rush in and overpay for something. We want to find businesses where we can pay a fair value that the owners feel good about, that we feel good about. But we don't want to go buy something for 5 or 6 times, especially with where the federal fund rates are, in debt and cost of capital, everything else. So that's why we've been a little bit more patient. We've been focusing on growing this VitaBox business, and like I said, we're playing for the next 10 to 20 years. Like, I don't need to go do something to grow in 2 to 3 years like I would if I was venture capital funded. So that's been cool, and continue to make a lot of really good relationships with brands. It may not be the right time for them to sell, but I've learned a ton just from the founders I've talked to, that when we talk about whether they're open to selling, just like how much of an open book they usually are. Like, we'll have great conversations about their business. Maybe we'll go under NDA and they'll send me their financials, and we'll just talk about, even if I'm not going to buy them, like, what can they do? What are things they can improve? And just lay the groundwork to build their relationship. So, hopefully when they do sell, I'm the first call that they make. But it's been cool to take all the experiences I've had, and then I've probably looked at 100 businesses, like P&Ls, and really got into the weeds with some of the founders of how they operate over the past year, and like just learning from them too. I mean, I think on the flip side, like having come from big CPG down to small, like I really admire the people that just jump into it with, no CPG experience, that just, they figure it out, right? And like they get after it. Like, there may be some things they can improve or outages, but like most people that are entrepreneurial, just, they find a way to make it work, and they find a way to figure it out, which is, for me, like a lot of fun as I have conversations and look for brands to acquire.
Yeah, agreed. It is amazing what some people accomplish, that like teams of one that just start a company or teams of 2, and they scale it to like it's in like 1,000 stores or something. You're like, how the heck did they do this? It's really it's really incredible without any experience. And then there's small tweaks that probably you with your experience you can say, change A, B, and C, and they can grow exponentially. So you can add a ton of value there. I'm sure. So what's next for Cincy Brands? Anything else you can talk about in the future that you guys are planning on doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we're hoping to acquire probably 3 more brands next year, and build out the portfolio. We'll continue to grow VitaBox. Our goal is to try to double that business again next year. So, that's kind of it. I think we're trying to build out our team, and continue to build out our team with good people, and our philosophy. And I think probably just having been through now seeing the private equity and venture capital side of the world, like probably I align more with kind of the private equity side of the world, where like we're gonna add on team members, as we're kind of bursting at the seams to grow. Like we're not going to overbuild out the team where you typically might in a venture capital world, because you've got to drive top line growth really quickly. So we'll grow slow and steady over the next year, and hopefully get some good with this deal we may close in January. Hopefully get a good case study of what we're doing that we can use to have conversations with other founders to try put unique deals together.
Awesome. Shifting gears a little bit, something we like to probe on with people is just around kind of working methodologies and how you manage to get the most of your kind of weeks and days. So maybe you could give the audience a bit of a flavor for how you prioritize, how you organize to kind of be as productive as possible. Obviously, you've accomplished a lot, so I'm curious to hear what your methods are.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a perfect formula with it. I mean, I probably struggle sometimes, like everybody does, with all the things you could be doing and prioritization. But I'd say for me, I try to, on a weekly basis, and even down to like when I start my day, is like, what are the if I ended the week, what are the 2 or 3 things that I really want to get accomplished this week, that if I don't get accomplished, I'd be disappointed. And I try to focus on doing those. Then on a daily basis, I try to do what are the 2 to 3 things today that I really want to get done that will move, have that kind of highest impact to move things forward, and try to get those done. And then, I think about what not to spend my time on or what not to get distracted on. I kind of use a simple, XY graph of impact and effort. And can I go get the low effort, high impact things first? And then if there's high effort, low impact things, maybe do I even need to spend my time on those? Are they even worth it? Or can I outsource it? We've got a great offshore team for some of those things that we outsource. So it's trying to figure that out. I use an app called Focus Keeper, which is nothing just other than a fancy timer, but I try to work in time blocks. So I'll turn on, I'll really keep heads down and try to not get distracted for a 20-minute period. Then I'll give myself a 3-minute break to, think about or do whatever I want and try get into it. Otherwise, Smart. It's easy with everything going on. You've got your phone, you've got internet access. It's easy to get distracted and, check every ding that comes in on your phone or every pop-up that comes in on your email.
Yeah.
You're one of the first people we've asked that question to actually talk explicitly about what not to do, which is maybe one of the more important things. I think
it's honestly
it really
I almost think it's more important. With our team, when we set our quarterly, we use the OKR system that Google and everyone else uses. We spend probably as much time talking about what we're not going to spend our time on, because it's not going to add that much value as we do what we're actually going to go do. And I think it's important, right? Because you can get sucked down rabbit holes that, you're I just burned 2 days or a week on a project, that when you take a step back, you're does it really help grow top line? Does it really help improve profitability?
Yeah,
probably not. Then why did I just spend all my time on it?
Just punching air sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%. I like that. Another question we like to ask all of our guests is, what is your product or brand crush? So what is a product or brand that you either love the product itself, you love what they're doing from a marketing perspective, it's something you use perhaps? It doesn't have to be anything you've ever worked on. It could just be a product you like in your personal life. But what is your sort of brand crush? And as a marketer, I'm curious to hear this answer.
Yeah, no, that's a great... Honestly, I probably haven't thought about it. I used to always have a good, thoughtful answer to this. I probably haven't thought about it in a while. I'm trying to think. I would say probably, I don't know, a brand I'm really liking right now, because I've got some friends that work at startups, and people always send me product, or as I'm interviewing founders. There's a men's grooming brand. It's kind of small. I think it's a few $1 million. called Huron out of New York. I know the guy who's their CMO. He sent me a ton of their product, and I've never typically been one. Like now I'm getting a little older. I'm like, I got some wrinkles, everything else. You know what I mean? I've never typically been like the men's skincare guy. I was always the Old Spice guy of like, I'll just use body wash on my face and move on with myself. So I think they do a really cool job because their packaging's great. Like it's simple. It kind of has that like elegant Apple type look. Like from what I've used, like the products are pretty cool. So I've been pretty bullish on that brand and just trying to like learn more about what they're doing. And I know they're trying to expand to retail, and I think they may be onto something and kind of have an interesting spin on things. So not a nationally recognized brand, but I deal with so many of these brands that I'm trying that people send me after I talk to them that I kind of find and discover things that I'll, of everything that I get sent, I probably don't use half of it, but the ones that I end up continuing using, I'm like, all right, there's probably something here, at least for me or people in my demographic that might like it.
We like the hidden gems. Also starting to get those wrinkles myself. So I think maybe I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Last question we'd like to ask. If you were up on a soapbox in front of 20 young professionals, eager to make their mark in consumer products, whether that's as entrepreneurs or moving up through the ranks of a big company like P&G, Unilever, or Pepsi, or something like that, and you were going to give them one or two pieces of advice, what would you want to give them?
Yeah, I would say try to understand, like when you're young in consumer goods, try to soak in everything you can from all aspects of the business and really understand what matters, what makes things work. I would say if you can get exposure to your brand or your business's profit and loss statement to really understand, gross revenue, any kind of sales deductions or trade dollars you're giving, net revenue all the way down to, cost of goods, contribution margin, what you're spending on marketing and kind of the OpEx that gets you to net income. Like I wish consumer goods I was having this conversation the other day. I wish consumer goods were like, SaaS products or tech where you have like 90% gross margins on everything, but they're not, right? You carry inventory. You often operate at like a 10 to 15 net margin. And, you got to manage these things diligently and be disciplined about it. And like one error of launching a product and ordering too much inventory, like it can really like set you back or hurt the business. So trying to learn the P&L and like be curious about it and find, finance people, mentors, like in the business you work for that are willing to like spend time with you and really help you get an understanding is probably like one of the biggest things. I think understanding supply chain is probably cool, probably more important than ever with everything that's kind of happened recently, like how the product's made, how you get it, how you produce it, minimum order quantities, all that stuff especially for smaller companies. And then the other thing for people working at big companies is, I don't know if they still do this, but when I was the junior assistant brand manager on IAMS, like I had to write the monthly letter, which everybody hated doing, but usually everybody's reading it, right? All the way up to like your general manager, maybe even your president. So really embrace that and just try to learn as much as you can and make sure that you view that exercise as a way to dig into the business and understand what the key drivers are. Because I think those are the things that will always stick with you, because no matter what you're selling, whether it's online and looking at Amazon data, whether you're looking at, Nielsen scanner data, you're going to go look at the same metrics, like once you figure out how to analyze the business. So I think a lot of it's just coming down to like data analysis, understanding your P&L and understanding the key drivers. And once you get it down for one business, you can reapply that to almost any consumer goods business, whether it's food, whether it's beverage, whether it's personal care. Like that's the beauty about it. Like all these businesses function very similarly.
Love it. I think that's
awesome.
That's a lot of great advice. Yeah. Sean, really appreciate you coming on today and chatting with us. I think your career journey has been incredible. A lot of great learnings and advice throughout, and then of course the piece at the end that was awesome.
Yeah, super excited to see the next year what you guys do.
Yeah, likewise, and appreciate it for you guys having me on, and hopefully some of the listeners here were able to pull some nuggets out and get some value.
Thanks so much, Sean. Have a good one.
Thanks, Sean.
Yep, see you guys.
See ya.
What a great conversation with Sean. A really cool career path. Oddly enough, some parallels to mine. Like I also did finance undergrad. Thought I was going to go into banking or work on Bay Street, and then got into the CPG space, and then went into the better for you space. So a lot of parallels. Like I said, he's just done it better than I have, which is
kind of like the
cool.
Cincinnati Justin.
Yes, or am I the
You're-
Souk Sean?
I think that's probably more
Maybe
the
that's
case.
more. Yeah, maybe that's more accurate. But a really cool conversation. What do you think, Alex?
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought some of his final advice was super important in terms of just soaking in all of the various learnings you can get while you're starting your career. I really agree with what he had to say about understanding the P&L and the implications, how it all hangs together, and the importance of having that grounding to, if especially you're thinking an entrepreneurial path, to set yourself up in a way that is sustainable, from a business standpoint. Supply chain as well, obviously, has become a really important thing over COVID. And again, it's another one of these backbones to your business where if you get it wrong, it can be really hard to fix. So I thought those two pieces of advice were huge. The other one, he didn't so much explicitly say, but I thought he conveyed that he's living. It's just the importance of networking and reaching out and, talking about how when he was launching the brand for P&G, how he was reaching out to like the founders of Casper and Hubble and other brands to understand how they approach things. And I think, our personal experience doing this exercise of making you guys this podcast has taught us that people do pick up the phone a lot more frequently than you might expect, which his kind of example showed how that could benefit you and your job, and in a very practical way. How about you, Justin?
Yeah, yours are 1,000% correct. The other one I liked was that when he was talking about he could have gone on to be a director on an established brand or something like that, and he said, I really just wanted to follow what was interesting for me. I thought that was just a simple way to think about your life and your career, because in the world of LinkedIn and titles and what do you do for a living and all this stuff, people do get wrapped up in wanting to be a VP or wanting to be a director or wanting to be a president instead of just following what is truly interesting to them. And so by doing that, he's had all these unique experiences that he may not have had. So just a simplified approach that I think makes a ton of sense in people's careers that they should follow.
Love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Huge thank you to Sean for making the time and sharing his awesome journey and experiences with us. If you haven't already, please give us a like, subscribe, follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Ratings and reviews go a long way in helping us. So if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please throw us a rating. And other than that, look forward to having you back next time for another great interview. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.